comment. So we're going to start with that presentation right now. We're going to take a 5-minute break around 7-ish or so, and then come back with public comment. Now this is a period when we sort of walk through the plan and also answer any questions that you may have. During the public comment period, we're just going to take comment. We're not going to answer any questions because we really want to hear from you during that one. The state plan, and I'm hoping most folks got a chance to look at it, is something that's been part of New Jersey's operation since the 20s, officially since the 20s. So this is really nothing new, sort of a continuation of it. It's been reworked over the years to reflect changes in the needs and certainly the desires and the growth patterns of the state itself. So this is something that has a really long, deep history in New Jersey itself. Has a deep history in the country. I mean, everybody knows about Thomas Jefferson working with Linfont, laying out Washington, D.C., and Alexander Hamilton, working with Linfont, laying out Patterson. So this is something that's really rooted deep in the country's history, and something that we're proud to be a part of. My name is Jerry Schaffenberger. I'm the director of the Office for Planning Advocacy, and Dan Kennedy to my left is the deputy director. And we'll be walking you through the plan step by step. And if you have any questions, please be sure to write them down. And we really want to have everybody understand the plan as much as possible right now. And if you have any questions, and we have staff folks outside too who'll be more than happy to answer questions. We also have folks here from the administration, and I'm going to call on a few of them just to raise their hand. Rick Brown from DEP. We have Susan Weber and Jim Lewis from DOT. Right there. We have Chris Stark from the governor's office, and there's a few more on their way. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, before I turn it over to Dan, I just want to let everybody know the sort of the trajectory of the plan as it was released. It was actually released by the governor on October 17th of last year, and he had a press conference and he rolled out the plan and also Executive Order 78 that's associated with the plan. And we've been doing these hearings since the first one was February 13th, and there's going to be a 30-day comment period after the last hearing, which is scheduled for this Thursday. So even after tonight, you will have opportunities to put in written comments. So we really implore you to give us written comments as much as possible. It's very helpful to have something tangible to refer back to, so we can tell from the meeting context exactly what you wanted to see and what you wanted to say about the plan itself. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan now, and then we're going to both be able to answer questions for you in a little bit.
Good evening. I'm going to keep my comments to about 25 minutes to give us about 15-20 minutes of question and answer before we take a short break and get into the public hearing section. Thanks, Jerry, for the introduction. My name is Dan Kennedy. I'm the Deputy Director of the Office for Planning Advocacy. This office had been formerly known as the Office of Smart Growth, formerly known as the Office of State Planning. Back in different administrations, it had different forms, was structurally positioned under different departments. First under the Treasury, then under the Department of Community Affairs. Recently, through a reorganization plan, our office was moved under the direction of the Lieutenant Governor within the Department of State, housed within what's called the Business Action Center, which includes basically the business attraction and retention efforts that go side by side with the EDA's efforts, and also side by side the efforts of Choose New Jersey. So this partnership that we have includes planning. So we are the folks that are trying to get the planning efforts back on track in the state of New Jersey. As Jerry mentioned, statewide planning has been something that New Jersey has done since at least as early as the 20s. The modern version of the state plan came about as a byproduct of the State Planning Act, which was adopted by the legislature under the Kane administration. There have been two versions of the state plan adopted in the state in the last 20-25 years. This would be the third version of the plan. Can I see just a show of hands? How many people in the room have been involved with either cross-acceptance, plan endorsement, center designation, something about the state plan in the past? Okay. So everyone knows that we have the concept of planning at the state level has been around for quite some time. There have been some successes and not so successful stories as a result of the state plan efforts. So today we're going to try to walk you through what we see for the future of state planning and how we think we can transition the existing form of state planning into that vision. Walk you through the plan development process, which goes back in a real way until 2004, when the State Planning Commission started the cross-acceptance process, which is the process required by the State Planning Act to revise and re-adopt the state plan. That's supposed to happen by statute every 3 years. Last I checked, it was 2012. The last plan that was adopted was in 2001. So this administration inherited a product as a result of most of the phases of cross-acceptance being completed that had a lot of disagreement with local government. This disagreement wasn't something we concocted or kind of made up. This was something that was documented through the cross-acceptance process from the ground up, from local government. This process took shape during the past couple administrations when the lieutenant governor was a sheriff in Monmouth County and the governor was a prosecutor. So this isn't something that we've kind of, a good program that we feel should be turned over just to kind of put our mark on it. Quite opposite, this is basically a process that is supposed to result in a level of agreement with local government and a level of consensus as a result of the cross-acceptance process. But when this administration came into Trenton, there was nothing anywhere close to consensus with the regulated community or the local government, which we mean the county and municipal government. Nowhere near the level of agreement that you could actually argue that there had been consensus reached as a result. In every town in the state of New Jersey is required to have a master plan. As a result, the zoning ordinance that your local township governing body is required to adopt is supposed to be consistent with that master plan. But we have an interesting dynamic in New Jersey where we have a couple layers of government to consider. Counties also have master plans. Counties have authority primarily over roads and drainage, which are very important variables to consider. But they've also, over the last generation or so, stepped up into a role of organizing municipalities voluntarily, not because they've got a lot of authority, but because there's efficiencies involved. And a lot of the issues that we care about in the state in terms of transportation and water quality and air quality are really difficult to deal with town by town. Protection of open space, protection of farmland, those kind of things are really difficult to do property by property, town by town. So counties have stepped into a role that is a real meaningful one in this state to organize municipalities and try to get some common vision for that region. We also have authority at the state level that exists oftentimes as a trickle down from federal government. We have authority from the federal government that trickle down to the state government for under the Clean Water Act or the Clean Air Act. We have to make transportation investments that come through the Department of Transportation and through our municipal planning organizations in the state. So as a result, the local governments plan and zone, the relationship with the counties is pretty strong. But then we have state government that has all these different functional operations in different departments and different authorities. The legislature grants those authorities separately to the departments. So we have a DEP silo where a lot of the environmental restrictions are housed. We have a DOT silo where a lot of the transportation issues are dealt with. We have a silo in relation to affordable housing in the Department of Community Affairs. And pretty much none of these silos are required to work together. And we know that these issues are all cross-cutting. You really can't talk about transportation unless you're talking about environment. You can't talk about the environment unless you're talking about housing. So all these issues are interrelated, but there are silos created by our statutes that haven't effectively been managed through the state planning process. So we have all these different layers, and we have all this different authority. And we could talk to you tonight about centralized state planning, but in the end, we don't have the authority under the State Planning Act to tell your town how to zone. So that is one thing I wanted to reinforce early, is that nowhere in this plan does it call for municipalities to do anything that doesn't work into their best interest. And that's, some of you may look at that as a strength, some of you may look at that as a weakness, but that's the reality. So what is our authority under the state plan? If a governor chooses to use the state plan in a way to organize itself from an investment perspective and a coordination perspective between all the important functions of state government, then a state plan, we think, can be effective. So that's how we are choosing to use it. Some of the features of state plan you may have been in rooms talking about, the state plan policy map and the plan endorsement process, which both started with good, lofty goals and desires. The state plan policy map and plan endorsement process are recommended by this plan to be phased out, and I'll talk to you about how we plan on recommending doing that. We think that by listening to local governments through the cross-acceptance process, by listening to a range of stakeholders through our continued cross-acceptance over the last year, we heard resoundingly that the biggest problem that the regulated community faces and the municipality faces is that when they approach planning and zoning locally or making investment decisions on their private property, they face challenges from state government, and one of the main challenges is state government. They have also pointed some criticism to local government also, but that's under the state plan, and that's not our authority to effect. The statutes would have to be revised if that would ever be the case. So we're looking at doing our part in solving the issues related to physical and economic development in the state. So we've focused this plan by basically listening to what local government is telling us and what the regulating community is telling us on state agency coordination, the horizontal organization of state government. As a first step, if we're ever going to have any chance at having a good, solid, productive relationship with local government. So we're thinking about organizing ourselves first before we have any sort of hope of having more productive conversations with local government moving into the future. The solution for the state plan policy map, we have one of our attachments to the state plan is a linkage document that discusses all the linkages between the state planning act, the state plan map, and state programs, statutes, regulations, and requirements. And the state planning act requires us to identify areas of the state that are suitable for growth, limited growth, and conservation, agricultural kind of uses. We don't think that requirement means that we have to produce a map. We have for you today, and it's been online for several weeks now, a proposal for a criteria-based system that could use from information from the bottoms up to build a new system to meet that statutory requirement that we have to identify places. And we plan to use it not to basically from a top-down approach require any sort of changes. It's basically for us at the state level to identify where can we back up the local desires with investment priority and also permitting flexibility. And it just doesn't mean development. There's priorities that we need to be very serious about in this state that have to do with growth from a physical development perspective, actually building things or having things redeveloped. But there's also investments that need to be made in this state related to land preservation. We know that when we preserve a farm, we don't necessarily always buy that farm. We buy it, we preserve the farm with the goal of keeping agriculture viable. So what are the investments we need to make to keep the agricultural industry viable? What are the investments we need to make in our already preserved parks to make those assets as viable as possible moving forward? So there's investments prioritized on both sides. So this is not just about economic growth, but it's also about preservation in the context of how we can preserve land and voluntarily from willing sellers using compensated programs and innovative planning tools to see that preservation can happen at a lower cost to state and local governments, but also respect the fact that this is private property, and if they don't want to sell, they don't have to. Some of the tools that we talk about in the plan in relation to our preservation goals are not related to outright purchase of properties. They are basically purchasing easements from the properties, owners, and where the property stays in private hands, they still continue to manage their properties, make money off of their properties if they're agricultural, and pay their taxes and improve their houses and raise their families. So Those are the kind of tools that we're talking about in relation to preservation. We are not heavy-handed in this plan in relation to regulation because we feel that our preservation goals can be met through more willing seller and willing buyer relationships using our tools under the municipal land use law that can be improved, and also the fiscal tools that we have now and can generate with being more creative with our resource and revenue coming in to make sure that we have revenue for land preservation moving forward without being an exorbitant burden on the tax base. There's likely going to be, at 7 o'clock or even during the question phase, you're likely going to hear a wide range of concerns, public policy concerns from the room. And I think that's what we expect, and that's what we've heard over the last 4 meetings. So the question I guess we all have to ask ourselves is it okay to let state government continue to be not working together? What are the fiscal impacts to our tax, to the people we answer to in terms of property taxpayers, the people we're looking to improve land area in our city redevelopment? How is it smart for us to continue to let state government be disorganized? So we may disagree on a lot of things. Maybe we can agree that the state of New Jersey is a complex organization that needs some level of organization, some level of strategy that may not, which we're not presenting here, does not creep into the day-to-day life of local government or property owners, but also is effective in making sure that what is desired at the local level can be translated up through a process. And the state of New Jersey can become a better partner to deliver on what the local desires are. We have resource constraints, both from a fiscal and environmental perspective, that require us to rethink our strategy at this time. We don't think the strategy we have in place now, the 2001 plan, effectively deals with the issue of state government coordination. State government coordination has been and will always be the top issue of local government through the state planning process. So what we think we have basically put forth to the public to let us know what they think is a plan that has a set of values, a set of core goals that can capitalize on the strengths and assets of our state, which includes our people. We have a real sound base of our workforce. We have our people are talented, they're passionate, they're well educated, and they're one of the big reasons why the companies that are here and they want to come here are going to stay here and maybe grow here. We have extensive physical infrastructure in this state that certainly needs improvement. We need to make investments in this state to keep our existing transportation network healthy. Are we going to make the hard choices to make those investments in the places that can really deliver economic development assets to the regions of this state that are local? Our geography is unique and diverse. We have a state here like no other, I think. I'm a 4th generation New Jersey resident. I'm raising the 5th generation New Jersey resident in my house right now. I really love this state. I know many of you do also. We kind of put up with some of the New Jersey isms because of how interesting this state is, from our coasts to the Pinelands to the Highlands, to the job opportunities, to our transportation system, to the arts and culture that's in this state. So as New Jerseyans, I guess we're used to putting up with a little bit because we think we get so much back. So that's why I'm here still, and that's why I think that's our story. Part of our story is also that we've got a serious base of industry clusters in the state that can employ our folks to make sure they can pay their bills, put their kids through school, live a happy and productive life. If we just really start paying attention to what those industry clusters need. So we have identified in the plan some key sectors in this state that we think are here now, that we want to grow organically. This is not a home run economic development strategy, kind of pulling a pie in the sky. We're not talking about making monstrous investments to get firms here from all over the place. And these are the companies that are here. They have bases in New Jersey already. We can keep them if we are smarter about how we treat them. And of course, there's a property tax conversation that goes along with this. There's a regulatory conversation that goes along with this. The state plan doesn't really give us the authority to get into those details. We know that those are issues. The governor, the lieutenant governor, this administration, everyone in the cabinet understand the reality of the business climate of the state. And in a big way, this plan is the kind of quality of life complement to those ongoing efforts. We know that in the past, the state government has suffered from lack of leadership from above on these issues, and we think that we've got a team in place, like them or not, that can actually deliver on what the state of New Jersey has to do to assist local governments and the regulated community stay in this state, be effective, and be prosperous. To do that, we've set a real high-level mission. We're not talking about what we think should happen on your property. We're not telling, part of our vision is not telling the town what to be. Our vision is really, I'm going to read it verbatim so there's no confusion, that New Jersey will be the national leader in private and public investment, which supports sustainable communities that attract and provide strong economic opportunities, preserve our state's natural resources, and create healthier communities to work, reside, and recreate. So the key word, I think, in this is support. That our job is not to dictate, but to support towns as they try to meet the challenges they face at the local level with, of course, with property taxes and caps and all that. What's our role in supporting local government? And our mission to do that in that is to focus our policies, New Jersey's policies, state policies, and investments on these regions of the state. We need to foster job growth, support effective regional planning, because we think that that's regional is probably a better scale than state to really get at some of this detail, and to get to that end product.